Dr. Nishant is a behavioral ecologist and a PhD from National Institute of Advanced Studies, Bangalore. He's also associated with Frontier Elephant Program, FEP, since his doctoral studies in the behavioral ecology of Asian elephant in a human-dominated landscape of Eastern Ghats. The topic that he will be talking today is the millennial male elephant. So I would like to invite Dr. Nishant Srinivasaiah to the stage. Welcome, Dr.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All yours.
Greetings, everyone, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you very much. And thank you, Mimi, and the team at Sinhasi for this wonderful opportunity. It's an absolute pleasure, like I said. Well, I'm Nishant. I study elephants. And the topic for today's discussion, I thought, would be talking to you all about the male elephants that I've studied, and I continue to study. We are into our 15th year of study on these elephants. We know about 500 individuals in a population not far away from Bangalore, and we look at the decision making of these elephants as to how they're changing their decisions in response to a rapidly changing urban environment. Let me start with a video. There you go. So this is an adult male elephant with tusks. We call him Chip, and the reason we call him Chip is because the tip of his tusks have been chipped off, probably because of him debarking a tree or something like that. But what you would expect, and what we had known largely of Asian elephants and bull elephants especially, was that they would be living solitary lives when they reach adulthood. And this is a mature adult male doing his own thing deep inside the forest, about 150 kilometers from where we are today. That's dusting and bathing. But not all elephants are like Chip. There are elephants who are exposed to human activities and to our infrastructure and development a lot more than these fellows. Let me tell you the story of P. Mac. Now, here is an elephant who is also an adult bull. He doesn't have tusks, what we call as makhnas. And here he is moving from inside the forest outside into agricultural areas at night. We use camera traps a lot to study elephants, and that's because a lot of these elephants who interact with people, when you try and observe them, they only display a fight or a flight response. So taking the human out of it and bringing in technology like the camera trap helps you get closer to the elephants but also understand them better. So here is PMAC going out of the forest at night at around 11 o'clock and then coming back into the forest early in the morning by about 4 o'clock. And he does this like clockwork almost every day. And so the farming communities, they were up in arms and they said, we need to do something about this. What we decided to do, and by we, I mean the forest department, the local communities, all of us, is put up a fence. And this is an electric fence, a solar-powered electric fence. And it has pulsating current running through it. So it gives an unpleasant feeling to the elephant when it comes in contact. But the same night, the fence was brought down. And no points for guessing who brought it down or how they brought it down. But what we see the next morning is this. And if you can please play the video. So that's PMAC, who's coming back into the forest early morning. And remember that those electric lines probably have current. Look at how, yeah, I don't have to say much. But please watch till the end and watch his tail as well.
Oh, look at the tail.
And PMAC this time is not alone. He has an associate with him who's observing, who's waiting, who's patient, who's learning. And what we saw when we explored this particular landscape, and it sort of came up from a sentence that Professor Sukumar had written in his thesis about male elephants who come into crop fields and they group together to go into the crop fields and feed on crops. And when we started exploring that, we in fact found bull groups of size up to 25 bulls together, 25 male elephants together. And this would happen mostly in areas with highly fragmented forested landscapes. Small forest patches in a matrix of crop fields. And the elephants seem to find safety in number. So even if there are bulls going out, they'd like to associate with one another, hang around with one another, learn from one another in order to improve their survival rates. But still, and this doesn't necessarily, is not limited to the human-dominated areas as only, but when they come into the forest as well, you see such associations. So this is Muni, who's walking deep into inside the forest. And PMAC was about 40 kilometers from Bangalore city. Muni is about 100 kilometers away. And he has two young associates with him, both males, who are the subadult stage, about 10 to 12 years old. They're probably just leaving their natal groups to explore what it is to be a male elephant. But they are very easily impressed. And this is the issue. We have these elephants forming bull groups and staying out in human-dominated areas as a strategy. Because feeding on nutritious crops gives them a lot of resource to build body size. And for elephants, bull elephants, especially in male elephant societies, building body mass is extremely important when it comes to competition with other males. And so they use it as a strategy. But of course, it's not easy to have these elephants around in a large water body or tank when you have crop fields around you and you know that they're going to feed from the crop fields at night. What is happening is really that the elephants are responding to the rapid changes that are happening in their local ecological and anthropogenic environment. And this decision by the male elephants to group together seems to be an anthropogenic influence that we see. And if we are able to change the sociality of an elephant, who would largely be a solitary individual to a group living individual, you can only imagine the kind of impact that we as human beings have on large species like elephants in the Anthropocene. This has its problems. They get hit by trucks, they get hit by trains while crossing roads, infrastructure, while making their way to the crop fields or to the forested habitats. Now let me just get you back to the story of PMAC. You all knew how they brought the fence down and how careful he was when he was passing. But then he wouldn't stop the habit of going out. But there was one particular change this time. The fence was removed because it was not effective, but still, PMAC, whenever he went to that particular position where the fence was, he would lift his leg up to try and cross the fence. And this is behavioral conditioning. And what we think really the hope for a lot of these elephants who we work with today is the behavioral adaptability that they are showing. And we've learned a lot from them. And the question really is, can we adapt to their requirements and needs as well? Thank you.
Thank you, Nishant. That was really crystal clear and very clear to us. Maybe we should take a question from the audience. Would anybody like to ask a question?
Just wanted to ask you, as more and more bull elephants are getting captured due to this reason, is it not impacting on their culture and on their family learning processes for the youngsters?
Yeah, absolutely.
Won't it be damaging in the long run?
I'll tell you what the effects, it's very interesting because now we've studied them for about 12, 13 years, the bull group specifically. And what we know is certain bulls play important roles. And it only depends on what age class or hierarchy in the dominance that they occupy and the role that they're playing at that point in time. Losing these bulls means loss of that knowledge, loss of cultural knowledge that the elephants have. Sometimes it could be navigating spaces within the forest, but it's also sometimes navigating human-dominated landscapes. So they're extremely vital. They almost play the role of a matriarch, for example, within the female groups. And so loss of these bulls would also mean that the younger individuals who are in the group split and they don't know how to respond and behave, which makes them more aggressive towards people.
And very vulnerable.
But in the presence of the older bulls, they are much calmer. So in some sense, the older bulls, I think, are doing the job of maybe 50 forest personnel who are...
Can't the department take note of these findings and accordingly design how they will...
Oh, absolutely. One of the things we've been advocating is more than human design. And that is trying to consider the role of these various organisms, and not just elephants, but life around us while we develop, And one of it is really this. And the forest departments that we work with are extremely conducive in the sense of taking in inputs, but also giving us a lot of information on what's happening. But going ahead, it's a difficult thing to manage, because the mortality rates of these elephants is nearly 5 times more than when inside the forest. So we're losing them at a very high rate. So that is also something that we need to keep in mind.
You know, I think after speaking to a lot of you people who are very engaged with work in elephants, they seem to be extremely disciplined with adults. I cannot say much about that now for us, but they have a very severe, wonderful hierarchy and a very familial kind of a space, and with a wonderful training that goes from the seniors to the juniors, a very wonderful mentoring process. And when you rightfully said, if you remove that one element and you get an adolescent sitting in front of you, that person doesn't know what is right and what is wrong. And I do believe that my daughter, who's here also with us from Western Australia, Hamsini, thank you for joining us all the way from there. And she works with the indigenous people in a very hardcore, extremely aggressive environment in Western Australia and in the Great Sandy Desert in the Kimberley region. And she worked with Ranga. And I think you said that you followed Ranga for a very long time.
I had the privilege of actually knowing him. I mean, we knew him from a different name in our database. But he was one of those older bulls who had a lot of knowledge. And
And you know, the saddest part is he got hit by a truck and died. And it's very, very sad, and therefore that is possibly one of the reasons why the younger males come out. And what is greatly interesting this time, Nishant, is that we normally think that bulls are solitary, that they're actually in herds.
They're very social, yes.
Very social. So again, Forest Department, I can see that key takeaways. What would you say the 3 key takeaways of your research and your presentation would be?
Well, thanks. I think what is critical is long-term monitoring of elephants and their behavior. I think it's very important that a lot of the conservation actions that we all are so keen to take should be heavily driven by the science of it, as to what we know of the elephants. And by science, I don't mean classical science of exactly being scientific, but being factual and knowing the information that we have of the individual elephants. And individual elephants take different decisions over time as they grow and they learn from their experiences. So it's very important for us to really keep track of what's happening to the landscape around them and how the elephants are responding to it. So one of the key and critical aspects is please have long-term elephant observations and monitoring. I mean, if Professor Sukumar studied elephants for the last 40 years, 50 years, you can imagine the kind of information that he has and what he's been able to do with it. And that's very important, especially in an era where rapid changes are happening around the habitats of elephants. I think the second is the use of technology. I think we really need to get in more technology and figure out how we are able to get the information that we have in a very short and concise manner out to the managers so that quick action can be taken. And the third, I would say, is individual, which is something that's very close to me and my heart, which is to acknowledge that individuals have agencies, they are actors in the system that we are working in. And that's where I think the idea of the more than human design comes in, where we acknowledge that we are not just alone on this planet, but there are other animals who can influence our decisions as well. And it's probably high time that we are influenced by their decisions.
Most conflict happen over crops and agriculture and in spaces where they both are there, forests. And so is there some way that your work and Dr. Chiranjeev's work can be married and we look at it at a long-term, in a long-term way? Because he is coming up with solutions which can in some ways sustain. So how is it that we can look at sort of tweaking this only behavior of elephant to agriculture as well?
Absolutely. I mean, thanks so much for the question. And I think you spoke my mind. And thank you, sir, for your talk. I really enjoyed listening to you. One of the things we do is the individual elephants that we study visit individual farmers and their crop fields, and we work with communities, which I didn't get the chance to mention here. But we work with the individual communities, telling them the stories of the individuals who come to their farms. So we link that. And I was actually thinking when you were speaking that it's really great to have heard him and to try and work together, because I think that's where and I don't know if I have 10 seconds?
Yes, please.
Okay. So we've sort of theorized what space for an elephant could mean. And there's the organic space, which is what the elephant can sense, smell, and touch and feel. There is the imagined space, which we think is what the mothers and the grandmothers of the elephant that we're currently dealing with were roaming in, and what they had, and that knowledge has been passed on. But then there's the lived space, which is what we think really is the conflict that the elephants are in, which is the conflict between the imagined space of what it was to the organic space of what it is. And that's where I think the agricultural areas really come in, and we really need to.
What a
look forward to
fantastic
working.
suggestion, Swarna. And, Chiranjeev sir will be indeed most
Absolutely.
happy to work with you, Nishant.
Absolutely,
So a
looking
good
forward to
takeaway from this session. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question. Sorry, 1 minute.
Please.
I am Vinay Javgal. I am from the IT and sporting world, from the corporate. So what can we do for you? What is that you need?
What I thought was, let's finish there are 3 more presentations about elephants.
Okay.
And all of them require everybody's assistance.
Yeah, but
So may I,
what thing is, you should touch what is your business problem? I mean, what is the problem you're trying to address?
The problem we're trying to address, one is, I think, how can we reduce mortalities of these male elephants, or even try and reduce how elephants can come into captivity. Professor Sukma spoke about the issue, and he said that it's a potential that there are more elephants who are going to come into captivity, and we heard Suparna say how are the issues that you have of an elephant coming into captivity. I think what we should really work towards through long-term monitoring of elephants and informing the managers is try to see how we can reduce elephants getting into captivity.
see,
Thank
what
you.
a researcher actually needs is support.
Yeah.
He needs infrastructure, both tangible and intangible, in various sorts. And honestly, they can come up with checklists on that front. And that's what research is all about. You require to give without expecting something in return, which is in the form of or an ROI. The ROI is going to come in terms of the knowledge on how to protect these male elephants to get killed. That's the whole issue here. Wonderful, Nishant. Thank you so much for your crisp presentation with key takeaways. Thank you. Yeah.